If you would have told me 20 years ago that I'd be surrounded by a bunch of guys in recovery, lots of who have felonies, I would have said there's no way, because it's just not how I envisioned my professional career. But I couldn't imagine another place to be at this point.
Welcome back to another episode of Finding New Waters. My name is B. Reeves. I'm the Director of Business Development here at New Waters Recovery in Raleigh, North Carolina. And got a very special guest today, Brandy Klingman. And I'm going to try to give a quick synopsis of what she does, which is a lot. So she is the CEO of St. Christopher's, which is an all men's treatment center in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. She is also in private practice as a psychotherapist. She also works on policy reform, traveling back and forth from Louisiana to D.C., and is also in the process of opening up a women's treatment center also in Louisiana, but not in Baton Rouge. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I think my middle name here is just also. Yeah.
I hear you. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for being here. And the reason you're here is I just want to mention to give a shout out to our friend, Hope Aldred, who was a guest on the podcast and is a good friend. And about 10 days ago, put us on a group text and said, you got to have Brandy on. I said, all right. And you were on vacation and then you hadn't been back for 15 minutes and she had said something about it again. I said, all right, let's do it. And you were down. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I love Hope, and I'm just trusting that, she's got the best intentions. And I got to listen to a podcast earlier today, and it was so good. It was so good. So I'm excited to do it.
Well, thank you. We're very lucky that we get great people on here and guests and people who are doing great work. And we have an amazing producer, Solomon. So all I do is just sit here and basically listen. So I don't, not that you were giving me credit, but I certainly don't deserve any. So, yeah, tell us, kind of go down the list. Let's start with St. Christopher's. Tell us about that. And then we'll go down the list of all the stuff you do, Miss Also.
So, St. Christopher's is an all-male facility. It's been around since the late 90s. It's been a long time. It's a long-term facility, so we believe in long-term treatment. People are with us on average around 8 months. So it's not someone's first go into treatment, but it should be their last round of treatment. The goal is to this to be your last stop into addiction and then move into a life of recovery. And so we have a real strong brotherhood out here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, of sober guys from all over the country. You wouldn't believe it. And if you would have told me 20 years ago that I'd be surrounded by a bunch of guys in recovery, lots of who have felonies, I would have said there's no way, because it's just not how I envisioned my professional career. But I couldn't imagine another place to be at this point. And then the also is I'm a clinician. I'm not in recovery. That's a pretty unique thing in my world, to be someone, a CEO and a clinician who's not in recovery. And the guys give me flack about it sometimes, but it's okay. And then I do have a little small private practice. I see people occasionally. I keep my license up to date. I'm very involved in the clinical treatment of our guys. So about 15 years ago, I got in touch with Dwayne. I'd been friends with Dwayne, the previous owner of St. Chris, for a long time. And it was a hardcore 12-step program, in which we still are. We still have a lot of hardcore 12-step aspects. But I just was, adding my clinical 2 cents when he didn't ask for it, and just kept giving that until somehow I am now the owner of St. Chris, and we have a lot more clinical milieu with us, like a lot more clinical stuff that we do in our program now. So that's kind of how the clinical part came into St. Chris. And then I still have a practice that I'll see people, I'll consult all around the country. I have patients all over that I'll consult with or assess and refer to treatment. And I was doing a lot of that up in DC because of my circles, being up in DC talking about policy. A lot of people are like, hey, while you're up here, do you mind talking to so and so? And so that's kind of how I've been in the circles up there for a while.
That's awesome. So when you're up in DC working on policy, without giving us away any secrets or what you can't talk about, but what are you doing?
Yeah, so it's not top secret. Most of it's not top secret. It's about policies that affect you and I, like people on the planet and anyone with mental health or substance use. If My opinion is that if there's going to be a decision made about mental health or substance abuse treatment, um, we need a voice in the room. And so whether I'm invited or not invited, I like to be a voice in the room. I like to be at the table discussing what I think is important. So everything from way back when, mental health parity, we were champions of that, and we were supporting that at the state level and up at the federal level, saying that mental health and substance use, even though at the time they were two different diagnoses, we were saying in at the state and the federal level that they're the same and that they need to be treated as equal to medical ailments like cancer or diabetes. And so we were advocating and pushing for that through the Obama administration, and we've been since then advocating and pushing, and we'll push with senators, and we'll join support like and support senators and representatives and administrations, president administrations, and we'll also push back when we need to, saying like, no, we disagree with this policy, and we think these revisions would be best.
Let me ask you this: since for as far as I know, this is the first time we've had someone openly in 12-step recovery in a cabinet position with RFK Jr. as the Secretary of the Department of Home Health and Human Services. Has that, in the short time that he's been in that position, has that opened any doors? Has it helped at all from what you're up to?
I'll say it has been kind of helpful in certain ways. So, I would say again, that's openly. There's been others that haven't been so open about their recovery, but yeah, he's openly in recovery. I'll say he's open to conversations, and he's open to having new ideas in the room in ways that we were struggling with a little bit before at times. Different administrations we've struggled with, whereas he seems to be pretty open to that. I think there's struggles in every administration, regardless, but I have been impressed. I was up there during the inauguration time for meetings, and while there, we were discussing lots of discussions about who was taking what cabinet positions. And so again, I wanted my voice in the mix of those positions that would affect us. And he was willing to have meetings, and I thought that was really good.
That's cool. I mean, without this being a political statement, I just think it's really cool that we have somebody who's, openly clean and sober through the 12 steps, who's been clean and sober for 40 years in that position. So it can't hurt, I would hope.
Right, right. It is helpful. It was funny because you know who he's good friends with, that's also identifies as a person in recovery, is Mike Tyson was around during that time. And so
Yeah.
one of their handlers got me into a meeting with the Mandela family, and then they said, "Can you talk to RFK and Mike Tyson next?" And I was like, "That's such a weird combination," but
Yeah.
sure, yes.
Yeah. I, from the little I know, I think, RFK Jr.'s recovery might be a little bit, built on a little bit of a stronger foundation, but hey, the fact that people are open about it, and this is something that actually comes up on this podcast frequently, is just for me, and a lot of people agree with this that I've had on here who are in recovery, who knowing that celebrities who are really doing the deal clean and sober, knowing that is very helpful, especially in those early days, because I would look at somebody like Robert Downey Jr. or Trey Anastasio, the lead singer of Fish, or Richard Lewis has even come up on here, and the list goes on and on. These people have everything, and they still choose to live this way. So that was super, super. It's still helpful, but very in those early days, it was very helpful to know that.
Oh yeah, I think it helps take the stigma away of like having something disgusting or gross about you, and that's not what it is. It really is an ailment. And so seeing other people who've suffered in this way and who choose recovery when they don't have to, they have every
Exactly.
opportunity to not, it really makes
Yeah.
it nice.
Yeah. It's always interesting though how sometimes I'd been very sober like 4 months, and I went to go see this guy who was a family friend who was a headhunter when I'd been sober for a few months, and but I hadn't gone back to work, and my family was like, "What are you doing? You got," and so I go meet with this guy, and he's looking at my resume, and he's like, "Okay, this is interesting." And then he kind of looks at me. I said, "And I've also been sober for 4 months." I guess I was expecting this guy to be like, "Oh my God. Well, I've got this really even better job with double the pay for you with 4 whole months of sobriety." But he looked at me like I would, like, he'd seen a ghost, and he said, "Well, okay, well, you have that under control now?" And I said, "Yeah." My point is people, no matter what, there are still so many people out there who don't get it. And even if they do have somebody, it's unlikely that anybody has somebody that somebody doesn't have somebody close to them, a family, a friend of a friend who has some kind of, has been through something like this. But still, people just don't, I just can't expect everybody to get it. It was a great lesson in my personal anonymity, as well as just another reminder that not everybody gets it, but we're working on it.
Right, right. No, I see that a lot. And I think like I see that even in DC, like people will they'll snicker or say something. I remember there was recently like a white pouch of cocaine found in the White House, and they were like, "Oh, well, it must have been Hunter Biden." And people were asking me this, as if I'm some kind of expert on the White House, which I'm not at all. But I think just, by proxy, they were asking me this, and I was like, "Do you think Hunter Biden is the only person who's doing cocaine at the White House?"
Right.
I was like, there's a lot of people in and out of there every day, and there's a lot of people who have serious problems and they're not ready to talk about it. And then there's also a lot of people who are in low-key recovery and aren't like outwardly talking about it up there because there's still a lot of shame, and there's
Absolutely.
risk.
Yeah. I mean, and if nothing else, it's perceived way to be compromised. But back to RFK, I mean, I think and I haven't heard much from him about it since he's taken his position, but what a great opportunity to kind of chip away at that stigma even more, because, I
Mhm.
mean, it is not only is it, like you said, like a DSM recognized a disease, but also, I mean, I trust people I know who are in 12-step recovery more than anybody in the world. That's the
Same.
irony, you know? Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So how did
I
you,
think
but go ahead.
I think whenever I tell people what I do, most of my peers, are more academic and more political or whatever, and I'm talking to a lot of them, they have no idea about this whole other world. And that's the thing I say consistently over and over about people in recovery is that people who are working a program are the most open, and you can confront and you can discuss disagreements and be honest with them. I think it's something that is very different from the non-recovery people, the normies, like in normies you don't confront, you don't say things straightforward to someone's face. You're going to talk about that later when they walk out. Whereas in working with this industry and working with so many people in recovery, it's just such a freedom that comes with this population.
Absolutely. And it's so refreshing to, we get in heated discussions, whether it's at work, about work, or in my personal life, but just to be able to make a spot amend on, and say, you know what, I was out of line. I'm really sorry. I hope that won't happen again. What else can I do to make it right? Or when I on the receiving end of an amend, I mean, all this stuff was just completely foreign to me. My whole life it was like, oh, sorry, and but you still do the same thing a million times and just say I'm sorry and make no effort to correct it. But yeah,
Right.
we're dealing with people who are in recovery, and it's not like you clearly get it and act accordingly, and you didn't need to go to the depths of addiction or alcoholism to get that kind of way of living, which is
Mhm.
another thing. Why hope was such a great example of that too, about, like, this is sort of off topic, but, and I know you deal with lots of families, and you say, even, when you're going to DC, they're like, hey, while you're here, talk to this person. And, and, the funny thing is the families always, or at first, a lot of them, and I know mine did, and families I talk to all the time, when we suggest they have their own form of recovery, whether it's through Al-Anon or going to therapy or group or the family program at different treatment centers, a lot of times the reaction is, well, what, wait a minute. Like, I'm not the one who I'm not the alcoholic here. Why am I being punished? But the thing is, it's a way for them to get their own serenity and freedom without having to, go to hit a bottom through drugs and alcohol.
Right, right. And I think it's funny whenever they'll say these things to me in bold proclamations. We're not the one. It's not us. Fix this person. And I'm like,
Right.
just I'm a statistics person, and statistically, the odds for your loved one doing better will improve dramatically if you are doing your own work. So if nothing else, if you're just doing it to cross a box off as done, let's just get yourself into some treatment and get yourself some help. And in the end, they love it. Like they never our family alumni, they stay forever. They've been there for years. I know they're
Yeah.
meeting tonight on Zoom. You know?
That's awesome. So Saint Christopher's, affectionately known as Saint Chris, is the namesake from the patron saint of safe travel. Is that what that's from?
So, yeah, he's also the saint of lost and wandering, and
Ah.
so, that's what Dwayne named it after. I wouldn't s it's difficult because Louisiana is a high Catholic state, you know,
Hmm.
and, so people will often say, like, "Is it because you're a Catholic facility?" And that's not it, we're not that, but the name is of Catholic origin, about the patron saint of the lost and wandering.
Yeah, I love that name because I mean I was thinking about it in a bit of a different context, but it still made sense to me.
Mhm.
Um, and so what? So you did you go to school knowing you wanted to work in behavioral health and addiction, or did you, how did all this happen?
No, like, I knew I liked psychology. I started liking, like, serial killers when I was little, and I was like, "Oh, what are these psychos? Like, I wanna study these guys." And, I liked, family dynamics, I liked human behavior. I'm a real nerd, so anything that was nerdy, you can count me in for that. And so I really liked all of that, and I started in private practice in mental health more than addiction, and then started a dual diagnosis program in Baton Rouge, and I was like, "Well, this is really it," you know, I was like, "Well, Dwayne's doing this. Let me work with Dwayne and give him some more clinical at St. Chris," and then I just really didn't like that addiction patients were getting scraps. Like, I just felt it was unjust, and they weren't getting good science, the research wasn't there, and they needed more attention, and I'm an underdog girl, so I was like, "Well, you need a fighter, and I'm a fighter, and I'm a excellent clinician, and so let me lend my skills to this group that needed what I thought back then about, 20 years ago now, I thought you needed some support." And so I jumped on. And it was funny because in the beginning, I never saw Dwayne in Louisiana. I only saw him out of state at these different things with Gary and Miles and
Hmm.
all the guys, all the old guys were there, all the old timer guys. I say old timers, I know they're not far from my age, but the guys in the industry forever. And so they would all be hanging out and I'd be like, "Hello, I'm here. I'm not in recovery." And just be like, "Can I hang out with y'all, John Southworth?" And
Yeah.
they would all share their numbers, but then they'd go play golf and do their thing. And I was like, "You're gonna need me. I know that you don't think you do, but you do." And so I just keep popping in over the years. And then eventually I was just like, "Forget it. You need me. You're a bunch of messes. Like, let me help you out." And so I just kind of jumped in, both feet.
Yeah. Well, when you mentioned that adding the clinical component to a hardcore 12 step program, I went to a, what would be considered a hardcore 12 step program too. And I loved that. I didn't know anything about anything until all of a sudden I was there. But when I think back, I mean, my primary counselor was also a humongous part of that spiritual experience I had that led
Yeah.
to, the beginnings of a spiritual awakening of the educational variety. And the guy, he said something to me, one time that my dad had just died right before I got sober, and his illness and death was a big part of like the acceleration that led to it and all that. And I was sitting in his office one day, and he was a great, great therapist. It still is. And but he was a hardcore guy, New York guy. And I was sitting beside him. We were doing a little bit of work. It wasn't step work, but it was some kind of workbook stuff. And we were talking about regrets and stuff. I mean, I was pretty early in, probably like less than 2 weeks in. And I wrote down my dad died thinking I was a drug addict. And he got up beside me and he put his arm around me and he said, "No, man, no, you got to change that." And I thought he was about to say, "He died knowing you were a great kid and you were going to end up, you get your life together." He said, "He died knowing you were a drug addict." I was like, "Oh my God." But without that tough love from a clinical perspective, I needed that. It was
Yeah.
exactly what I needed that day. And I don't know if I would have gotten that, without that clinician being there at exactly the right time for me.
Yeah. I think it's important. I think what I saw was an industry that had great bones. I I saw also some large gaps in need, so like for instance, every patient at the time was being, and maybe you too, were being diagnosed as antisocial when you came in the door. And antisocial personality disorder. And first off, that's more rare than we think. And even the narcissistic personality disorder, at the time, it was a fatalistic diagnosis. It was, there's nothing to be done about this. You're a narcissist or you're antisocial or, but really what it was is you just had some maladaptive coping mechanisms. I have them too. Mine are just, unfortunately, it's just being extremely neurotic and working through, let me outwork you in my own coping mechanisms. Um, but yours happened to be drugs or alcohol, and so it didn't mean that you were antisocial or a narcissist. And I didn't like the idea that we had an entire generation of people, because what we were seeing on the epidemiology side of it, we were seeing generations of addiction coming, and with the legalization of marijuana and the synthetic population that was out there coming for you, and we saw the heroin increasing due to the opiates, we saw a generation of affliction coming. And I just thought, like, we're going to really struggle when all these people are diagnosed antisocial. And then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy that there's no cure for you, there's no cure for personality disorders, and this is what you'll be forever. And what your job is just to tuck it in as best you can and get through life. And I really didn't like that message. And so I felt responsible as part of like a solution and like a voice of saying, no, that's not it.
That's really interesting. I didn't know that that was kind of what everybody was relegated to and until recently. I mean, I see how, and I hear that, that there is no cure for narcissism and all that. And, but, maybe think about just, I could see how that would be the thing. All right, well, these people are selfish and self-centered to the extreme, which it tells us in 12-step literature, which is true. But, but we're not stuck there. We just
Yeah.
know that that is kind of can be a default, but when we work on ourselves, then we overcome being
Yeah.
selfish and self-centered in the dream through service and committing to working the 12 steps. But I remember, I'm sure you're familiar with that pamphlet from Hazleton called King Baby.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I loved King Baby. It's my
Yeah, oh
favorite.
yeah. Well, I love it now. When I read it, I was like, oh my God, I'm so selfish. It's about me.
It's
But I
about
mean, it
me.
was,
I am King Baby.
yeah. Yeah. That's really interesting. And yeah, I mean, good on you for that. I mean, the stigma, I mean, just in my short time of being sober, just over 7 years, I mean, I've definitely seen it come a long way.
Mhm.
And an example of it is what we just talked about with RFK being a openly clean and sober guy of 40 plus years now. But, where else are you seeing it where, where not just the stigma, but what needs work?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of work needs to happen. What I like, I'll say, let me start with what I like seeing. So, this generation of young people coming up are so embracing of this discussion. They're embracing discussions about addiction or substance use disorders. They're embracing mental health. They talk about it constantly. I don't know if you've interviewed anyone lately. They interview, their first thing is, "Oh, I want to work in
Yeah.
mental health because I have mental health." And it
Right.
kind of like takes me a second, even though I'm grateful that they're honest, and sure, who doesn't? But just being in my 40s, that's not how we talked about things back then. So
Right.
um that's a positive, seeing them embrace and like the tolerance for all of it. I think we get a little kooky with some of the overdiagnosis and pathologizing things, like with, I don't know if you have TikTok. I love TikTok. I'm so into TikTok. And they'll say, "Oh, well, if you do this, then you're autistic. You do this, you're a narcissist." It's just, you can fall down a rabbit hole. And so they often pathologize too quickly, but that comes with youth, of
Hmm.
saying, "I do something and therefore I am this," and that's probably
Hmm.
not the truth. But policy wise, what I think we are in a really risky kind of area, because we have a lot of synthetic influence on our streets. And so the smarter we become about drugs and drug culture, so has the world. And there is a lot of influence from foreign governments who are pushing these synthetic products into our streets. And so to me, that is a big worry. I'm really worried about that. And so I'm spending a lot of time and effort in supporting litigation or policy or legislation that confines this. And it's not that I'm a joy snatcher. Like, if you want to be a Delta consumer, okay. But you're not consuming knowingly yet. because it's not
Right.
regulated. So you don't know what you're getting. And unfortunately, what you are missing is the foreign influence that's kind of coming in and serving what you think might be one thing, and it could be something completely different. And the example I give a lot of times, I do this talk all over the country, is to say, like, the gas station hot dog has more regulations. You're safer eating that gas station hot dog, which nobody really wants to eat, no sober person. Uh,
Right.
but then taking one of those gummies or the Kratums or whatever, all of that is synthesized. It's all sent overseas. A lot of it comes illegally into the country, even though it's sold on a gas station shelf to make it look like it is safe. Same with even the THC waters and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very interested in policy around that kind of stuff right now. Also, I'm very interested in any kind of policy that limits or regulates treatment options for people in recovery. So there's a lot of prevention dollars that go out, and there's a lot of treatment dollars that go out every year. And we just had that large, massive opioid settlement, and
hmm
you know, uh, without giving any like just things away, just the money wasn't. It didn't go to what I believe it should have gone to. And so
That's
treatment
not a
dollars
surprise.
just went away, to different
Yeah.
departments. So like your local police got a lot of those treatment dollars. And it's not that police don't need dollars. That's regardless of the conversation, but it's that it's that those dollars were supposed to go to treatment, and they didn't. And there's a lot of people who need that availability.
Interesting. What I got a specific question about on that subject we were just talking about, but what's
Yeah.
up with Kratom?
Yeah, so it's a synthetic product, and you're buying it in capsules or even and worse, loose powders or whatever in the gas stations. And so each state is going about trying to make it illegal in their states. So our state, our parishes, because we're in Louisiana parish rather than county, each of our parishes is kind of fighting it right now. We had a state regulation, and then it got wiped away because some lobbyists argued against it. And so now our parish by parish is regulating that. And it's happening in North Carolina and South Carolina as well.
Good. I mean, it's we see it more and more, and it's people are really struggling. And the saddest part is people who I've never heard of anybody dying from kratom. I'm sure it's happened, but it's still part of the larger opiate use, and
Yeah.
leads to fentanyl and all kinds of bad endings. But what's really awful about it also is that it's got this mystique, kind of like you're talking about. Oh, but it's sold at the gas station. It's legal, And the funny thing is, before I got sober, I heard about kratom and that it could be kind of a placeholder for you when you didn't have the other stuff. And I looked it up on Wikipedia, and the first sentence said banned in Europe and Thailand, comma. That's all I needed to read to say, oh, I'm going to get that. And then I'm serious. I'm dead serious. I mean, I was telling this guy at a meeting the other night who just relapsed on kratom. And but there's this disconnect, or people kind of hearing what they want to hear, seeing what they want to see, but it, people think that since it's sold over the counter that it's okay, and are happy telling themselves that, but it kind of makes no sense because, alcohol is sold legally too. But
Right, right.
what I mean, other than, and is there like a lobby, you mentioned the lobbyist that got this bill off the desk of the governor of Louisiana, or however it went down.
Mhm.
I mean, are there these not even dark, just open dollars lobbying money for the kratom specific industry? Is that a thing?
Yeah, so there are you wouldn't be surprised. I mean, you would be surprised because I'll go for a congressional hearing thinking like it's no big deal. I'm just coming in as the expert to give testimony. And then I'm bombarded by these people who are fighting to keep it on the shelf. And I don't know who they work for is the problem. And
Mhm.
so they have the disguise of we're American made company and this is local dollars, it's a local industry, a local business. But what we know for certain is it's not synthesized in our state. It's not, nothing is being synthesized in the states anyway. Any states, not
Mhm.
just Louisiana. You
Mhm.
you send that to China and it's synthesized in China or in other countries too. And then it's brought into our country. And so, the regulations aren't there then. So then the FDA doesn't know what's going on. It's not a political thing about it being from a foreign country. It is a safety thing. You don't have any regulations from the FDA or ATF. No one's looked at it. And so you don't know the potency. And then you have this whole culture of the web culture, like Reddit and these kids, TikTok and all that, talking about kratom safe. And this new one that they're swapping out for kratom, they're saying, well, I'm getting off of kratom, so I'm doing H2 something.
Mhm.
And it's just some other version of synthetic
Mhm.
opiates. And they're believing what they're hearing on the internet, because that's a downside of this generation, is the internet is telling us the truth, and it's a dangerous risk, and they don't realize what risk is there. And I'm sure you've seen it in your detox. Like, these kids coming off of kratom, it's hardcore on them. It's not easy.
Absolutely. And I mean, and the insurance carriers don't like covering it because
Mm,
they can sort of use the fact that that it's a gray area for their own reason to not cover it too.
right.
Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't.
Yeah, they can argue it, and we have to
Yeah.
fight, and
Yeah.
we know the risk. Like, you and I know the risk of kratom use. And it's so hard because you have to champion that out loud, because there's a whole group of people who are saying, no, 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 this is safe. This is good.
Yeah.
And I
Well, and the other
almost would
thing,
rather battle like the ketamine or the, ayahuasca or something like that, because that is more regulated than this. And it's more monitored than this. This is just, you can get however much you want at the gas station tomorrow. You can go back the next day.
you mentioned ayahuasca. What I mean, that I don't see that as, I mean, I've never done it, wouldn't do it, but I don't see that as something that people could really abuse and get addicted to. But when you mention it, like it, would that be regulated just for safety or to keep people from like abusing it in your
Well, I
eyes?
think I think unless, unfortunately, in this country, unless we have regulation around something where it's being tested and it's then sold in Walmart, it's safe enough to sell in Walmart. And because you have to meet so many standards for safety in order to sell in a public place. Until it's in that situation, I think you are posed at risk. Your population is at risk for being victimized by any other influencer. Any person from anywhere in the world can sell you something, and they don't have any consequence. We can't go after them. So, for instance, like the synthetic, and ayahuasca is not that. Like, ayahuasca, people aren't coming trying to sell people ayahuasca. It's totally different. But I
Mhm.
mean, those people having discussions about that is much easier than having a discussion about this, because this, you have so many people coming at you to fight you from the shadows, and it's just like, what are we what are we even talking about? This is a safety thing. Like, once you get it safe and you can sell it at a Walmart, who am I to say do or don't do this? That's your decision. But until then, it is my job to tell the public that they are at risk for something that is unregulated and unsafe. And there are cases of people dying, unfortunately, from a reaction from kratom, or from psychotic episode and suiciding from kratom.
Yeah,
Um,
well, and the delta that you mentioned, whether it's now in drinks and teas and THC, delta beer, whatever it is. I mean, we see so many, not, I wouldn't say so many, but on a regular basis, people of all ages, but mostly between 18 and 25 who have had a psychotic break or THC or delta induced psychosis who are completely scrambled. And
right.
often the parents are the ones who are, cleaning up and paying for this and living with this. But so often they still don't even see, they're like, I don't get it, and I'm usually, a little bit younger than the parents of the people I'm seeing.
Mhm.
But we all are kind of close enough to the same age to agree that, that weed was very different when we were growing up than it is now. But it did this amazing job, the marijuana lobby, and it had a little bit of a point that it was kind of safe, compared to everything else. But then as it was becoming unsafe and so potent, the lobbying never stopped. And by the time it was, becoming legal in certain states, it was like a different thing altogether. And, the legal or not, but I mean, this is a different drug altogether that is scrambling people. And then these synthetic versions of it are even worse, is what I see.
That's what we see too. And so that was a perfect example. Like, the Delta, they don't understand that it's not a safe thing, and they're seeing it in a can and it's sold in our grocery store, and so they're thinking that that means that it's safe and regulated, and it unfortunately isn't. And so the last legislation, we've been around this Delta thing for the last 3 years, and the first year when they were getting it authorized to be sold in cans, they were like, the lobbyists for that group came forward and said, hey, it's not addictive, it can't be abused, and you won't become dependent. Okay, so and all of this. Oh, and you can't get high. You can't get high off of it. That was the third one. And so I was like, this is not true, but I
Yeah.
wasn't I wasn't at the congressional hearing. I was watching it and I was like, wait a second, no, that's not it. And so then last year we went up and we're like, look, that's not true. Someone just lied to a congressional hearing, which is against the law.
Yeah.
It is all of those things. And there are real risk. There are kids who are becoming psychotic. And I did a whole, spread for them. I went on radio show after radio show and congressional hearings and this and fighting the lobbyists and these warriors who are coming after you, saying you're coming after their jobs or you're coming after their industry and this is tax dollars to your state, and they're fighting. And look, I don't want to fight you. Go get it regulated and go into the weed dispensary then. Do it that way. Don't
Hmm.
come after our kids without giving any warning. And one can, if you open up a can, nobody's drinking 1 ounce out of a can. The can had 8 servings because it had 8 ounces. So there's who's
Right.
opening a can and drinking 1 ounce? I don't even know what that even looks like,
That sounds
So
like a big loophole.
yeah, all these people were fighting and going through the loopholes that they could go through to get these things that, and you know what, that who does that? That's drug dealers. That's who
Right.
does that.
Yeah.
That's not legitimate people who are trying to be, health and safety and wellness for our youth. That's not it. That's a drug dealer. And so we need to put some precautions there. And some of the legislators that were against us did flip, and they weren't happy about flipping. But when you're telling them, look, they're coming after your kids in your area. And you're going to be the one calling me in a few weeks saying so and so psychotic because it's a small state and you're going to need help. I know it because two of you have already called me, so
Yeah.
they're coming after your kids. And we need to have some kind of barrier to keep them safe. Now, adults, okay, th- that's not that's not for me. But at least for prevention for youth use and putting some blockades in place until you can better regulate it, that makes common sense.
Agreed. And just while we're on this note, for people who are listening to this or watching this who have are curious about this or especially have, loved ones, kids, whatever, who are they suspect or know or kind of dabbling in this, where would you recommend they go to kind of get some real, you know, true, accurate information in kind of one consolidated space?
I think NIH has some good information around the deltas. But that's a good question. I don't know other than that who has it. Like I know I'll send it to you. I put out a piece of facts to know to our legislators this year around the Delta stuff. And I'll send it to you. It's like a 12-point sheet that just says like, did you know this? Just to give them an understanding of the risk that they're looking at. Because a lot of people, they just don't understand it. They're thinking of it as the same as alcohol.
Right.
And it's just unfortunately it's not. It crosses the blood-brain barrier immediately. It stays in the system for over 30 days. The propensity for psychosis, the first episode, then the second episode prior to the age of 21, you're talking about schizophrenia diagnosis.
Hmm.
So the risk is just know the risk of what you're allowing your kids to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's I'm really glad to not because we know people we've talked about this with other guests on here, but I've never had anybody who really has just a real kind of inside look at what's going on and is involved in the policy shaping because it seems so obvious to everybody who knows who works in this field or maybe has been through this with a loved one. But I mean, this is really dangerous stuff and it's dressed up as, pretty candy and, colorful fruity drinks. And it is scrambling and frying people's brains, and
Yeah.
it's very sad.
It's so hard to treat too. I'm sure you do too. Like when we get a lot of guys that come in like that, and it's heavy antipsychotics, and the parents are like, "Well, no, please don't do this." And I'm like, this is what you have to do for a
Yeah.
while. It doesn't mean forever, but for a while, we do have to do these medications this way because we are trying to give our brain some time away from that psychosis to recover a bit. And they'll say, well, this isn't it. I'm like, but the neurological damage of staying in psychosis puts your propensity of staying in psychosis, lifelong issues of episodes or constant states is greater. So the longer that you can give yourself, if you can give yourself 6 months to a year, even if that meant you had to be on medication during that time, that's going to give you the best chance of making it even longer. So we're looking at neurological impact. And I'll say the lobbyists for the other side are also looking at that. They know the science that I'm quoting, and they're quoting other research. It's not real research, but they're quoting other things to try to counteract us. So I know they're reading because then they are prepared for an argument, you know.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. And God, it's sad to see that what money can buy out there. Well, changing gears. So you're in the process of opening the women's program. Was this going to be like a sister program to St. Chris, or tell us about that?
Yeah, yeah, it's like a sister program. I have a new we added another partner in to help us with opening up the female program, but I mean, we're so excited. I always wanted to be with women. You know, I didn't picture myself being with a bunch of guys forever. But because I'm a girl's girl, but I'm really excited. It's beautiful. It's lots of pink and blues and pretty colors. St. Chris is not, it's not the Ritz. It's just it's a solid men's program. And so I'm excited about the girls and I'm excited about having tea, 2 o'clock on each
Yeah,
day and letting them have some time to be women together and in recovery and working on their own things without any men around. And I think it's kind of hard to find, good women programs. And we take insurance. So having the ability to use your insurance on someplace, it's just really kind of rare. So
that's awesome. What's it going to be called?
it's called Magnolia Bell. It was called
Magnolia
Magnolia
Bell.
House for a few minutes, and then we found out there's a Magnolia House in South Carolina, and
Okay,
so we switched gears.
I got you. Cool. And when will you be, or are you open, or when will you be
No,
open?
no, thanks for asking. Our grand opening is we're having an opening CEU event on the 24th of July, so a little frantic. And
Okay,
then
cool.
our first patient is the 28th.
Okay, well, congratulations on that. And like
Thanks.
I said, for St. Chris, I have not been there, but it has an amazing
You've
reputation.
gotta come
Eh,
down. You gotta
I
come
will.
down and hang out and eat some crawfish. And
I would love to. I
yeah, and
absolutely will. I
Clemens is about
love Louisiana.
3 hours, but it's totally worth it because you get to see a whole
Okay.
different part of Louisiana and all that. And the girls have their own apartments. So
Oh,
they'll
cool.
they'll have their own living room and bedroom while they're in treatment. So I think it's the same bones as St. Chris, but it's the girlier version. So
Nice. And it sounds like the two things you mentioned, it sounds like you want people to be, know they're in treatment, but also give them a taste of of living like a, like a lady, you know?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But I want them to feel like they are a woman of worth and in recovery and of value, and there's so much more light to life than just staying sober. We have a whole life beyond that too.
I hear you. Absolutely. Well, I think that's an awesome place to wrap it up. How do we find you, and how do we find St. Chris, and how do we find Magnolia Bell?
So we are online. It's addictionwellness.com is St. Chris, and womensaddictionwellness.com is the Magnolia Bell. So we're online all over, and I'm always around at St. Chris. So usually I'm handling they call me in for the bad guys, like someone's doing something bad. So I'm going in and talking to the bad psychotic guys.
Oh my God. Well, I would be terrified of facing you. Well, hey, listen, I just can't thank you enough, not only for doing this. This has been absolutely fascinating and just a great conversation. And thank you for doing it so fast, and congrats. And I look forward to coming down and seeing both programs, and hopefully we can catch up when you're in DC at some point.
I would love to. I really sincerely appreciate you having me and I want you to come. Please come and
I
see
will.
what we're doing. Like come be a part of
I
it.
will. I will. Thank you so much. All right. Have a great day, Brandy. If you liked what you heard today or just want to know more, give us a call on 919-670-8119 or visit us at newwatersrecovery.com. Thank you.